I start getting these in-the-moment death threats to my cell phone, my new number, that say, hey, are you ready to have your intestines removed tonight? Ready to die. I'm going to kill you. I'm waiting in your closet, all of these things. And it's in the moment. As far as I know, and I really felt this to be true, I was being watched. My phone was being watched, and I was being targeted in that moment.
I'm Jamie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula. On today's episode of Strictly Stalking, we're chatting with public speaker and community advocate Danny Cords, who was stalked by a man who was obsessed with destroying his life.
Immediately after finalizing his divorce from his husband, Danny begins receiving hundreds of sexually explicit calls and texts.
He discovers a fake profile with his picture and personal information posted on a gay dating app with over 10 million users.
Danny learns that his stalker hacked into an Associated Press reporter's email account to forge sexual misconduct allegations against him.
He turns to the police and a law firm for support, but even after moving away and changing phone numbers 3 times, Danny's stalker found his way back into his inner circle to harass his friends, his employer, and make death threats against his life.
Danny, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Danny, why don't you go ahead and just kind of tell us about your life growing up?
Absolutely. So as a gay man, not unfamiliar for the gay experience, or at least it was in the 90s and 80s. I came out of the closet somewhat early at age 14 and experienced something called conversion therapy, right? So what that is also called as sexual orientation change efforts. And it essentially is a therapy where your parents put you in this practice, or your church puts you in this practice, or a camp. If you've seen the recent film Love One Out, that was my experience as well. It's Exodus International. That's where I went to try and change my orientation, my innate identity, who I am. That was much of my youth, right? So if you think 14 to 17, huge stages in psychosocial development, growing up in a youth's life, in a child's life, that is a lifetime in its own. At 17, I was asked to leave home, dropped out of high school, and lived in this space, an in-between space, fueled by shame, where I was just quiet and scared and getting by, obviously lying about having my high school diploma and not telling anyone about anything. Until one day when my ex-husband and a really dear friend of mine encouraged and really pushed me back into the classroom, and I met a great community of support, which is always really important when you're overcoming any kind of trauma, is connecting back with your community. And I re-enrolled in school, and by 25, I got my high school diploma. 26, I got my bachelor's, and by 27, I was a Newman Civic Fellow. I got published, and I earned my double master's in organizational development and adult education. And mostly through this experience, I was able to work within the Washington State Senate with some of our senators to overturn sexual orientation change efforts in Washington states for minors. So we worked on the bill that helped ban sexual orientation change efforts for anyone under the age of 18 by a licensed therapist.
What was your life like right before you met your stalker?
Life was awesome. I have to say, from the 17 to 24, I still had a really great life. I just had this burden of shame from being a high school dropout. That's all I could see. But when I turned to 25 and got back into the classroom and joined different nonprofit boards and started giving back and started my career as a public speaker, I realized that the very thing that was holding me back was one of my biggest assets in leadership, because it allowed me to communicate my story, and the audience, the people listening to it, were able to connect and reflect on their own and put their own plan in action to make positive changes in their life as well. So my life has purpose and it has passion, and I love what I do. And before my stalker, I was with my ex-husband early on, even when I was a dropout. And then I was with my ex-husband all the way through all of the graduate degrees. And And it was great. It was awesome. I was public speaking. I was an advocate in my community. And I can't tell you what it feels like to live a purpose-driven life, but I hope everyone gets a chance to experience it because it's fulfilling. And there are very few bad days when you're living a life of service.
So, Danny, how did you meet your ex-husband?
I met my ex-husband through musical theater. I was 18 and I was doing theater professionally around the Seattle area. And I was what they call a swing, which is a character or a role that gets thrown into the musical when someone else can't. And about 2-3 weeks to curtain of the musical Chess, if any chess fans out there, musical theater fans, I got thrown into this production and I didn't bond super well with the cast right up front, but I really did with the pit orchestra. And walking in 2 hours late to the first rehearsal was this cellist. Everybody's swoon, everyone loves the cello. I did too. And, he's handsome. He's okay. I don't want to pay him too much compliments or too many compliments. He is my ex-husband, but he swept me off my feet a little bit. And ironically, my stalker was also in that production and helped set me up with my ex-husband as well. We bonded, and after each show, we would go out for happy hour, and my stalker would, really try and push my ex-husband towards me and was really proud that we were together.
How did you meet your stalker?
I met him in the Seattle Men's Chorus. I met my stalker in the Seattle Men's Chorus. I was 18, first year I could be in there. I sang with the youth version of the chorus as well. And we sat next to each other. We were both first baritones. And when I got kicked out of my parents' place, when I was dealing with a little housing instability, he was the one that came up and said, "Hey, come crash on my couch," which I thought was very lovely. He was also an accompanist and doing professional musical theater. It's a small world in Seattle. He would play on a lot of the shows I would perform in.
And what did you think of him when you first met him?
At first, I thought he was a little weird, but there's a lot of weird people in this world. And when he offered me to come live with him before we really knew each other, I thought, wow, this is a guy that is opening up his home and his heart and doing something great. Of course, I'm young. I'm still in that pre-period of my life where the pre-phase where I'm still the dropout, not confidently sharing my voice yet, and dependent really, truly on other people. So I thought it was a great gesture, and I really respected and valued him as a friend. Very quickly, though, we started to see that if we didn't invite him to dinner or a birthday party or Disneyland with friends, he would retaliate, or he'd find ways to interfere with your life, whether that was changing the settings on your phone to sending you malicious texts or what have you, or posting on your social media timeline. So we thought it was all practical jokes, but they weren't funny. They were malicious, small things at first, like changing your keyboard from English to German, which just swaps 2 letters around and it makes it really hard to text. That's how it starts. Or he'll turn on an alarm when he knows you're going into a really important business meeting. I had a meeting with a casting director from Telsey, in New York, who came out and he took my phone and he made it quack right in the middle of my casting call, which was awful. And he thought it was hilarious. Or he would go into somebody's Facebook, which was really interesting because he found his way into Facebook to post that somebody was pregnant. So these weren't normal practical jokes as he would write them off. They were something that would really get people excited and in the wrong way. And he would always say, "Oh, I'm just kidding." But he really loved to get a rise out of people. And we knew that within the first year of knowing him. That was just who he was.
So what was your friendship like with him, knowing that?
It is the weirdest thing to look back on this, because I have been raised and my values tell me that I need to be inclusive and love everyone and be nice to everyone. And I also have a background. My bachelor's is in education, K-12 education. So I see people like all the time. They just happen to be little kids. that almost similar behavior where you just want to wrap them up and support them and help them get out of that cycle of their life so that they can go on to be great adults, right? And I wanted to support him. The worst thing is to have no community. Community is the one thing that really sees us through trauma and helps us translate disruption and trauma into something powerful, whether that's leadership within ourselves or something back to the community. So I wanted to be a friend, and I knew that he was the kind of person that if I did not invite him to dinner, he would find a way to retaliate. And in fact, when we didn't invite him, my ex-husband and I didn't invite him on our honeymoon, he didn't talk to us for 3 months, and he retaliated by messing with our phones.
Danny, what did your husband think of him?
He really liked him, but he wanted to be with us all the time. He wanted to dominate our social calendar. He wanted us to live with him and spend every chance and opportunity with him. And I understood it because he was the same guy that didn't talk to us for 3 months when we didn't invite him on our honeymoon. But my ex-husband was still really good friends. They also became really close because my ex-husband, being a professional cellist in musical theater, being a professional music director and accompanist, they worked together all the time and bonded over those experiences.
Jamie, how are you enjoying your new DrinkWorks machine?
Well, as you know, I feel like I've turned my house into an exciting cocktail lounge. DrinkWorks works like a fancy automatic espresso machine. You just press a button and the machine does the rest. Only it's premium cocktails, not coffee.
And they have so much variety. There's a flavor for everyone's taste. From tropical cocktails to classic mixed drinks. There's even sangria or rosé spritzers. With over 25 drinks, it's the perfect way to try an old favorite or discover a new one.
It really came in handy the other night when I had a friend over. I was able to offer him any drink he wanted. We both chose the new Jack Daniel's lemonade, which combines refreshing lemonade with premium Jack Daniel's whiskey.
The Long Island iced tea is quickly becoming a favorite at my house. It's so convenient. Just choose your drink, insert the pod, and in under 60 seconds you'll have a perfectly chilled cocktail or mixed drink on demand. All from the comfort of home, with no shopping or messy cleanup.
I know I've splurged on $20 cocktails, and they're amazing, but DrinkWorks is just as good, for a lot less.
And they've already taken $100 off the price, and they'll throw in free shipping. It's the best deal they're offering, and it's for a limited time, so don't wait.
The best way to get this amazing drink maker with the automatic savings plus free shipping is to go to drinkworks.com.
That's drinkworks.com.
No need to use a code. The best deal is already included. That's drinkworks.com.
And remember, please enjoy responsibly.
What were the first red flags that you saw that the stalking was starting?
The first things actually came from my ex-husband's new boyfriend. So around my 30th birthday, I was basically told by my ex-husband that, hey, I fell in love with the next door neighbor. You gotta leave. Sure, I'm a survivor. Within 2 weeks, you better believe I was out of that house. And within about 6 months, I started dating. Now, I'm not going to play innocent here. Divorces are hard and divorces are messy. And I was hurt, and I responded as most of us do. And I give myself grace for that. But what I did not do was interfere with their life. And what I noticed is that every now and then, this guy that was now dating my still husband at the time would send me text messages directly from his phone that would say, would you mind your own business, thanks? Or, hey, we got a cat. Or, did you see the apartment? You know, and it was the apartment, the condo I still was technically an owner on, with all of their stuff in it and things like that. And that was weird. We knew that this person was also weird. So there are 2 players, maybe 3. I don't know. There's a lot going on in this story because a divorce is intermixed, and I just know the fact. So he would text me directly from his phone. That was a red flag. I would message my ex-husband, and he would say, no, he would never do that. And I'm sitting with him right now. He's not doing this at all. But I would sit there and I would have my phone in my hand and I'd say, It's right here. I'd send him screenshots. And he said, well, I sat him down and I had a good stern talking with him. I'm like, whatever. And, of course, this is exacerbating our divorce. Now I am getting sucked back into the trauma of what it's like to go through a divorce, what it's like to be left for the neighbor, and what it's like to have it shoved in your face pretty regularly, pretty frequently. And that was a red flag. Then the energy shifted, and I don't know why it shifted, but it shifted to my former upstairs neighbor. And we always called this person Pollyanna. She was friends with everybody. She loved everybody, even the people in the building that we didn't like or that were really grumpy. She loved everyone, and she finds a way still to build connections and be friendly with everyone. My ex-husband's new boyfriend suddenly got it in his mind that she was going to his company's HR to try and get him fired. All these crazy stories. I don't know what's happening, but he would end up meeting her in the hallway. She would go out to walk her dogs, and she would come out or he would come out and say things like slimeball. And she would text me because, I was her friend. Now there's this new third party, and she's saying he's making me feel uncomfortable. I don't feel like I can walk my dogs at night. And eventually it turned into things like her Wi-Fi password being taped to her door, and it said her Wi-Fi password. And then underneath it said, it's a felony. And she says, I don't even know what this is. And it all came to a head when she was walking her dogs out late at night, and he comes running out in his underwear, as she puts it. This is her words. But what we do have evidence for is that he was screaming so loudly with a book called Corporate Confidential in his hand that there were witnesses, because the neighbors in the condos came out and the police were called. And she went into the court systems to try and get a no contact order against my ex-husband's new boyfriend, which is intense, especially hearing this. I'm still getting random little pings on my Facebook. I'm still getting text messages, but fewer, because this is going on with the upstairs neighbor. And whatever steps happen next, my ex-husband was not asked to leave, but the new boyfriend is a renter. And so the building association said, you're a renter. We don't want to rent to you anymore. Please move out. So they left the condo and moved in with my stalker. And that's when things got a lot worse. And another red flag. So we have everything with our upstairs neighbor. I'm getting texts. Then I start getting these two-factor authentication pings on my Facebook, my Gmail, my Banker Online, my Instagram. And again, I don't want to keep playing the divorce, but I'm going to anyways, because it's a sour place to be. This person that my ex was dating had actively bragged to my face about how he hacked his dad's accounts when his mom and dad were getting a divorce so that he could find if he was hiding money. And here I am getting my accounts, including my Banker Online, the two-factor authentication pings coming in and out. And, is my stalker involved at this point? Is it coming from the boyfriend? I don't know. It was never investigated. I will never know. I just know that this happens. And thank goodness I have my timeline and my screenshots that show this happened and validate that I'm not crazy. Somebody's trying to mess with me. So those are all red flags. And then I start telling people, I have a stalker. I'm getting these pings. Somebody's trying to get into my accounts. Weird things are happening. I've started getting spin dialers, which are these robotic calls. You can go to a website, or clinics might use them to send appointment reminders and things. And I would get the ones that were just pranks. I'm your daughter. I'm standing in your driveway, or a happy birthday, or a wake up call. And I would just get them ping, 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 one after another. And they would be different numbers at times. So you could block one number, but then that one digit might change, and they would just ping, 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 ping. Or you would turn on your phone the next morning, you turn it off, and you turn it back on, and it would just be boom, 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 boom. And it would make your phone useless for 30 minutes to an hour. maybe. One time my phone was so overloaded, it actually froze and shut off again and rebooted itself. And I remember I took this to the police, the Seattle Police Department, and they just kind of threw their arms up. They didn't take a report, of course. Very rarely, I think maybe I have 2 police reports throughout this entire experience. They didn't take a police report, and they just shrugged it off because it's these funny calls, but they don't understand that now you have a ghost. Your stalker is living in your pocket when it's your phone. You can't escape it. And even though it may only be a half hour, an hour of an unusable phone, if you turn your phone off in the night, it's a reminder that somebody cares that much about you being unhappy that they're going to stay up all night to send you these texts and things like that. So more red flags. And of course, in February, so we separated in September, early September. And in February, all 3 of them, my ex-husband, my stalker, and the new boyfriend, for whatever reason, came to a show I was working on where I'm on stage the entire time, looking out into the audience, playing multiple characters, and sat in the front row of this was just awful. I heard about it through a friend that they were coming. I told the producer, I'm not taking the stage if they're in the house. The producer says, you have to, it's your job. And I'm thinking, how much of a diva do I want to be here? Because I still want to get hired as an actor. And also, I want to be able to give a performance through every kind of experience. But my husband, the guy he's sleeping with, and this guy who just is not very nice anymore, is now in the front row of the theater. And the compromise was that I would do the show if they could get them to move to the back row, as opposed to the front row where I'd have to look them in the eye, maybe 10, 15 feet away. And what is really telling to me, as I was getting these pings, as I'm telling my friends about being stalked, my friends are getting tired of hearing it. Truly, no one really believed me except for 3 people. I don't know if that's because I'm a guy, a gay guy, if it's the divorce, whatever it is, I don't know. It probably has to do with people just don't believe victims, especially in stalking cases. We hear it time and time again. And so no one believed me. But thankfully, in this instance, I had friends in the audience, and my ex-husband came in because his new boyfriend would not move. My stalker moved to the back, but his new boyfriend wouldn't move. And he had to be physically moved to the back. And a few eyewitness reports said that he grabbed him by the arm and drug him to the back of the theater, because we were probably 20 minutes behind curtain at this point, because, I'm playing the role of the diva. And that was for sure what sealed it in, that, okay, now I know for sure that all of these calls, yes, it's kind of following the divorce milestones, but this sealed the deal that, yes, this has to do with my ex-husband. I don't think it's my ex-husband. I don't think he knew about it even to this day. He's not that kind of guy. I was with him for almost 10 years. Maybe he did. I don't know. But I really do believe it was the 2 parties, but this sealed it in. And I was able to even then go to the police and say, listen, this is all the evidence I have. I have these screenshots. They came to my play. This happened. He has a no contact order, I believe. If you just look it up, and they would just kind of roll their eyes, or, almost like a condescending pat on the head and say, oh, that's cute. At least it's not a real crime. I heard that one a lot.
So do you feel that your stalker was working with your husband's new boyfriend, and they were both stalking you and your husband didn't really know about it? Or do you think they were all kind of 3 working together? Or do you think your stalker was more doing this on his own?
I need more education on where the line is for stalking. And as soon as I find it, it will be one of my life missions to help law enforcement find that line, because they surely do not know. I got texts from my ex-husband's new boyfriend. I got harassed by my ex-husband's new boyfriend. It seemed to fade out at a certain point, and that point seemed to be when I started getting things that were probably breaching the line of legal and not legal. The things that maybe a death threat. So I think that there was probably a transfer of power.
What was your next step to try to make this stop?
I don't do what I did. This is not helpful, and it did not help my case. Post on social media. I'm in Seattle. I sit on a few boards, and I'm embarrassed to say that my first reaction that you should not do is I deleted things as they came in, as if it were a bee sting. I would get a text or something, and then I would delete it and try and block it as soon as possible, especially if it came in from my ex-husband's new boyfriend. I just really despised this person so much. I wanted nothing to do with him. Hot potato, delete, it's gone. Well, the problem there is, though that it might be your first response, you have no evidence and nothing to bring forward to anybody. Why would anyone listen to you? You're just complaining, and maybe you're a bitter divorcee. So that's number one. Number two was I posted on social media to try and get help from any and everyone that could help me. Seattle, we have Microsoft, Google, a Facebook office, all these things, thinking I'm getting attacked. Who out there can help me? And people gave me great ideas. It's how I found my attorney. But also, it turned a lot of people against me because I looked crazy. I would talk about it all the time. It consumed my life. It came into work. It was on social media. And of course, I went to the police a few times before the death threats. And then after the death threats, I certainly called the police. In fact, the first death threat, the ready to die ? Scared me terribly. And I checked my locks on my door. I already knew this person had tech chops. They were able to do crazy things. So I called 911, and I had an officer come out. And that was something I tried to do to get it to stop. And I said, I think this is coming from my ex-husband's house. I don't know who, but it's coming from that house. It's ready to die ? And he said, and I've heard this from other victims as well, that's not really a death threat. It's a question. If anything, it's implied, which is, I can't defend that. I'm just going to leave that out there for people to respond as they see fit.
When did you see things start to escalate, and what did it escalate into?
Sure. So the first thing was they wanted to see what I was up to. So they were logging into my Facebook, Instagram, Google. I have a few attacks on my banker online. Then I started getting the funny robocalls, and then I started getting these internet dialer numbers with letters and numbers, and those weren't funny. They would just call and call and call, and there was no way to block them. They would just keep coming and coming and coming. And from there, it was pretty rapid. It moved to death threats, and then the death threats started coming in. Ready to die came in a lot. Faggot, time to die came into play as well, pretty shortly thereafter. And it was pretty recent to them all coming to my show, actually, and probably having people witness like, oh, that was not right. Something's off here. And just that escalation happened there. So it went funny calls, the not funny, but more prevalent robocalls that just, I can't stress enough. It's just a phone call. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. But when it's a ghost in your pocket and you know it's tied to this bigger thing, it really destroyed my life for that minute. That simple phone call destroyed my life. And unfortunately, there's not much you can do about it. And then you pepper on some death threats on top of that. And then that's where we were. And then, of course, very shortly thereafter, the sex ads went live.
Can you tell us how you discovered that you had a fake profile on one of the sex ads?
Yes. This person, my stalker, was really good at making sure that my devices were blocked. And I don't know how he does it. There were ads on Scruff, on Grindr, and all over Craigslist. And I would start getting pings from people, usually just saying, hey, or what's up, or that sounds fun, where are you? And then my friends and acquaintances started replying as well. And there was a director I had worked with, And then there was a cast member I had worked with. And the cast member was responding to a very graphic, really uncomfortable sex ad about me because he was interested. So now I'm still working with this person at this point. I'm still in this theater company. And this person really wants to fulfill the ad that really makes me uncomfortable. It was really, it included everything from pedophilia to, he didn't respond to that one, but I've had ads from pedophilia to fantasies about getting infected with HIV, to all sorts of things, to rape fantasies. And of course, my stalker put my number and my address and my picture on these ads, and this person, this cast member, responded like, "Hey, that sounds like a really great time. I had no idea, lucky me," kind of thing. And I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about. Send me the ad." And around the same time, the director, thank God, pinged me and said, "This doesn't seem like you. Let me send you a screenshot, and it's okay if it is, but it doesn't seem like you." And I said, of course it's not. And thankfully, one of the platforms was really great to work with. Unfortunately, there are 3 platforms that were completely absent and required a lot to get these sex ads down when I'm working with children and when I'm serving on a board and when I'm working in scholarship. I shouldn't need a subpoena or anything. It's my photo. I can take a photo of my license, just take it down. I don't care what the Fair Trade Communications Act says. Do the right thing. And only one of those did. And I won't name the ones who didn't, but I'll say that Scruff did a great job.
And that's one of those things when somebody can impersonate you like that, they can cause so much damage. And it's almost like you could never find out who actually did that.
And that is exactly what I was told by the Seattle Police Department, that there was nothing that they could do about it, that they'll never find this person, and that they weren't going to bother to take a report or even bother investigating it. So I just had to sit there with these sex ads, which I ended up finding were all over the United States and who knows where else, with my private information. And again, my home address.
When those ads went up and you found out that they were live, did you get other responses from strangers?
I did. The really awkward and uncomfortable part of this is that when you're on Grindr or when you're on Scruff or the other platforms that he was using, I can't see those conversations because he was creating a fake one with my image, and he was chatting with people in real time. And I've never seen those transcripts. I guess they're not available, whatever. So that makes me really uncomfortable because I don't know who responded and I don't know what was said in my likeness. Where that was different is my stalker, when I posted this on Facebook and I started to get support, and also as the bill of conversion therapy is ramping up to finally get passed, I'm living my best life again for just a brief minute, and my stalker hates it, and he starts escalating again and puts my number up on Craigslist over the United States. And that's when I started getting more text messages coming in. And, I'm getting these robocalls still. I'm getting 2-factor authentication. Now I have sex ads fine. Add it in. I can take it, right? At this point, I'm pissed off and I'm ready to fight. And really the only thing I'm pissed about to this day and what I was then is that nobody would do a damn thing. I don't mean to be ugly in this moment, but this is your job as in law enforcement. And if you can't do it, find somebody who can. Because I'm dealing with this, it's tearing my work apart. I can't sleep at night. And now my likeness is being exploited online in the most disgusting ways. And you just shrug it off and send me on my way. That is still to this day unacceptable.
What were your next steps then once the police didn't respond?
I had to move. I had no other options. There was nothing else. The police weren't doing anything. It was only getting more intense, especially as my divorce was coming to the end. When we were getting into the division of assets, for example, it was one of the worst times for stalking. And my work performance was really suffering at this point. I would be at work hosting this conference for this major company in Seattle for quite a few folks that would travel internationally. And at the same time, I'm getting thousands of spam calls and sex ads and everything else. And I'm just trying to focus on work, and it's damn near impossible. And, I confided in my managers and my mentors at that time, and even the HR department, saying, I don't know if I need to take a leave of absence. What do I do? And they all were like, it's just a phone call. It's just the internet. It's not a big deal. That's how they chose to respond in that moment. Let them hear this podcast and change their mind, because that's a dumb response. And I ended up getting laid off. My position was eliminated. They were doing it a different way. I left them on good terms. That they said, come back anytime, all of that good stuff. But I'm thinking, I'm out. I can't deal with Seattle anymore. And I looked at jobs from here to LA, actually, to just move. I thought, if I can move, if I can get out of Seattle, I know this is coming from my ex-husband's household because of our divorce. If I can move and just write out the divorce and be as quiet as possible, that will signal to my stalker that he won. You can put the guns down. It's over. And I ended up moving down 60 miles south. The right opportunity happened to be in our capital, Olympia, Washington. And part of that was because I was still working on the ban of conversion therapy. And I wanted to still see that through. So I moved to Olympia. And unfortunately, it was almost an invitation to my stalker. It got even worse from there. Everything just picked up even at a faster pace. More death threats. He got into my Apple ID, which we've said before is like your social security number. All of my accounts, I had replaced my phone 3 times. I had 2 different phone numbers. I didn't give it out to anybody. I think my mom and my 2 best friends had it. I got a new laptop. I had a tech friend that works in tech for Microsoft come out and help set me up just to make sure that I had really solid security. And this person was still able to get into my accounts. And of course, this is a really shitty time. And I eventually posted on social media, and somebody said, hey, you might want to try this attorney. I had looked at attorneys before. Nobody wants to take a cyber stalking case. And they won't even respond. And if I get them on the phone, they usually say they just don't understand it. It's amazing we can be in 2020 and we don't understand the inner workings of our technology, at least in the way that we protect ourselves. And I use the royal we, of course. But I moved. I called this attorney in New York. This is all she does. Carrie Goldberg. She's amazing. And she and her lawyers teamed up to try and get the Department of Justice to at least look into this case. Just do a little investigation. Do something, because no one's doing anything. And we worked together for quite a while before that happened.
Once you found Carrie Goldberg, what were the next steps that she took you through? Well,
I already had my timeline, which is a great piece of advice I can pay forward. I know everybody else on this podcast has been sharing something similar, that you collect your evidence, create a timeline, get everything together, get it in order. What I ended up doing for them when they were doing their evidence collection, when they were doing their discovery as a new client, I tied it to the divorce. I said, hey, it was quiet 2 weeks up until I signed the quit claim RETA deed, for our condo, division of assets. And then I got 2,000 spam calls and 16 death threats and 3 sex ads. Shocker, right? We know where this is coming from. And then they were able to work within their legal team to get in touch with the DOJ, who actually rejected my case. The death threats and the sex ads were not a priority for them. I got some of my worst attacks the night before. They said, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. And my attorney, even at Carrie Goldberg, said, I think we're done here. I'm going to return the rest of your retainer. I'm going to send you on your way.
The involvement with the Associated Press reporter, how did that come about?
A little context. I work with youth in a summer camp for kids that are infected or directly affected by HIV. That's something that's near and dear to my heart. I also love scholarship, especially in adult education. That's why I'm an adult educator and a public speaker, because I was a high school dropout that was able to reconnect with my purpose, passion, and contribute back to society. So the night before the AP report, I was working to lead a group of volunteers in a scholarship search committee and feeling pretty good about that, giving back. That always feels awesome. I get in my car, I'm driving home. Also, conversion therapy bill is just maybe 2 weeks away from being signed by the governor, and we know it's going to pass. And I'm ecstatic with that. And I start getting these in the moment death threats to my cell phone, my new number, that say, hey, are you ready to have your intestines removed tonight? Ready to die. I'm going to kill you. I'm waiting in your closet, all of these things. And it's in the moment. As far as I know, and I really felt this to be true, I was being watched. My phone was being watched. And I was being targeted in that moment. What do? I call 911. I say, I need to see someone. I'm driving down. I called some friends. I have a friend who's a public defender. She helped me, guide me through. And they get me into the Tumwater Police Department. And that is where the police officer actually mocked me and mocked my situation. And the police officer there, he seemed to care. But what he told me when I showed him those death threats that were coming in the moment, and I showed him my timeline, which I kept in a binder in my car, was, oh, dude, my buddy signed me up for senior citizen mailers all the time. It's just in fun. And then he refused the report. I begged him to take the report. He refused the report. I'm shaking. I get back in my car. I can't drive home yet. I call my neighbor on the phone just to talk to me as I go into my dark house alone, because I don't know if anyone's in my closet waiting to kill me. Okay, so that's night one. The next day, the DOJ denies my case. So I'm denied a police report. The DOJ denies my case, and I'm left up a creek. Nothing. My attorney's like, he feels terrible. There's, it's like, if they deny your case, we can keep paying the bills. I'm probably at 19 grand at this point, invested. Actually, it's more than that. 19 grand in legal fees alone. We're not talking about lost income, laptops, movie, nothing else. 19 grand in attorney's fees. So that's where we're at this point. Everyone's leaving me in the dust. And I'm just like, this is my life now. Okay. Find a way to pick yourself back up. Well, that is also around the time that conversion therapy passed, and I get to be in USA Today. I was one of their faces of pride, which is awesome, and it's great, and I love the opportunity. That is when I thought it was a good time to hack an Associated Press reporter's email. He happened to be out of, I think it was the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But remember, I was doing interviews with the Associated Press already for USA Today, for Huffington Post. I was in these papers because of conversion therapy. So when I got an AP reporter reaching out to me, sometimes it comes in through Facebook, sometimes it's through my direct email. I don't know how they find me, but they find me. I'm like, oh, it's another conversion therapy interview. That'll be fun. And I get excited. It comes in at midnight. I go in to read it, and this email had been laid out so well, I couldn't tell it was fake. I get reporters reaching out to me from time to time to interview me. I know what they look like. I know they do their research. I know how they talk. I have a theory that my stalker had read his other emails to kind of figure out the formula that they must use, because it was indistinguishable from something that my stalker is not that well spoken. And yet this email was very well spoken. And then on top of that, I still don't know how he was able to come up with these fake sexual misconduct allegations involving the campers who are infected or affected by HIV, saying that I had sexual misconduct. And he named the founders of the camp that I didn't even know. And he named people that were working at that camp that, again, I didn't even know. And this comes in at midnight. And it's really hard to even put words to this. When you dedicate your life and when you work so freaking hard to pull yourself out of the gutter and then to try and give back, and then somebody exploits that, I have very few words. And suicidal is an understatement, right? I'm like practically making a plan at this point. I'm still a survivor, but that's just where you are. I give back. It's what we do. It's what so many of us do. I'm not unique here. It's what we all have our passions. This is mine. I don't know what to do. I had a panic attack. I called the camp. They didn't know what was going on. I called the board that I serve on in Seattle with the scholarship. And I remember they said, I told them what had happened. And I said, it's fake, but, I imagine there's going to be an investigation. And our mayor in Seattle just got sexual misconduct allegations a couple weeks before. So I'm right on the heels of this. And I am a very value-driven person. And if I'm going to be accused of sexual misconduct, unlike many politicians in our world, and hear me when I say this, I'm going to go through the damn investigation. I'm going to give victims the right in court, and I'm going to let the investigation play out. I know I'm innocent. I would never steal that from someone else. And so I told that to the board that I was volunteering on. And I said, this is what's up. There's probably going to be an investigation. I'm going to let the investigation happen, but I am scared because there is a stalker who's after me and I don't know what evidence he might fabricate, but damn if I'm going to fight this in a way that would steal the voice from the victim. Passionate on that, obviously. And they asked me, so what do you want to do? I said, well, I have to step down. I can't continue to work with youth. I can't. I have to step away. I have to take a step down. And they said, yeah, we agree wholeheartedly. And I will never forget the way they said that in their voice, because I think, even though I think most of them believed me that I didn't do these things, there's always a part that just doesn't know. We live in the Me Too movement where we see so many of these terrible things coming. And I was now this predator in so many people's eyes. And I had to tell my employer, who was new. Remember, I had just moved to Olympia not long ago. I was with this employer for maybe 90 days, maybe. I think it was even in my 90-day probationary period. And I said, I don't know where this is going to go. This happened. I have a stalker. This company actually got up together and made sure that I was protected, that I was secure, and even proactively banned my ex and his entire household from entering any one of the buildings of this company. They did a great job, and I owe them a lot of gratitude. So that's the sexual misconduct allegations, and that may be one of the reasons why the DOJ switched their decision to take the case.
Once this happened, you went back to the DOJ and they agreed to take the case?
I actually sent out an email to everybody in my arsenal, my divorce attorneys, my Carrie Goldberg's team, to a few Seattle police officers that were just kind of consulting me as a friend. They took a report for this. In fact, my attorneys at Carrie Goldberg went back to the DOJ and said, do you want to rethink this one a little bit? And then that day it had moved forward. What I didn't know, though, was my stalker just so happened to be one of the highest in the IT department for a major law firm. And he was also recently let go from probably the largest law firm in Seattle as one of the heads of IT for misconduct. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I am curious. And there was a full investigation about stalking that was happening to a female receptionist at the law firm as well, that just so happened to be at around the same time, and they were starting to pick up on the evidence. And I came to know this because my number was being used to send death threats to the other victim in the stalking case. And I got this really random email on my Facebook saying, I'm a detective, you're being investigated, can you call me back? I have my lawyer reach out to her and say, buckle up, we have a timeline. And she was also able to cross-reference a lot of the points in my timeline with her timeline. And very quickly, things started to escalate on the SPD. on her side of things, she was the leader there. Maybe because of the law firm. I don't know. Because when I went to the SPD, I didn't get any help. I can't speak to why, but I have the data. So here it is. Here are the facts. So that happened over there. And then the DOJ was investigating. And then, of course, there was a little bit of fighting over who was going to take the case. Is this going to be local jurisdiction or is this going to be federal? And my attorney was fighting for federal, of course, because that's a better sentence. And we want him to go away for a long time. And, you know, for this crime he did.
What then happened with the court case?
When all of this was coming together, when the DOJ was re-resourced to my case, and the SPD was doing their own investigation, and they're still deciding who's going to take the lead on this, the detective, God bless her, said, okay, we know more or less who it is. We have probable cause. We can go do a smash and grab, a raid, essentially. One day, it was like a Wednesday or something, I get a phone call from my attorney and the attorney for the DOJ that was resourced to the case saying, hey, the detective at the SPD arranged a raid. I remember my ex-husband and I were still serving on a board together, and he had to send this letter that I got my hands on that just described the raid, which was so validating. And I'm not proud, but I am not going to pretend like I don't enjoy this. It said that at 7 a.m., you know, like 14 armed guards with, you know, big guns knocked on our door really loudly and took all of our electronics and made us kneel in the yard at gunpoint. And then there was a plea deal. The DOJ took the case. There was a plea deal that was put together. And I remember the federal attorney from the DOJ said, we're not going to arrest him. He pled guilty, but we're not going to arrest him because we want to do a full investigation and make sure that the charges are solid. Because I believe you only have 48 hours, I think, to have the charges solidified. And they wanted to go through the computers. I totally get that. That's awesome. And he told me what a lot of stalking victims get told is watch your back. So I'm watching my back, and this goes on for a couple months. And we don't hear a lot. We hear at one point the plea deal is drafted something around 3 years of prison plus I think 3 years probation, and restitution and all these other things. Again, I hear from the detective from Seattle Police who gives me a statement of probable cause to go get a restraining order from my stalker. Because we all know it's him. He knows I know. He knows where I live. And I go in to get my restraining order. It's a really awful, it's just traumatic experience. It's traumatic experience because you have to relive everything. The commissioner reads my address several times, and it was printed on the paperwork that I had to work on for my restraining order. The restraining order from my stalker, the whole proceeding. My favorite thing from that experience, and I use that, of course, with tongue in cheek, is that the commissioner verifies my address probably 2-3 times. And he asks if he knows where I live. And he says, well, I do now. He starts reading sentence. The judge read 3 years prison, 3 years probation. So ended up going to prison, and we had 2 really great federal judges. And my favorite was the Honorable Robert Lasnik, who said, it doesn't matter if it's a bomb, a gun, or a knife to your throat, or an iPhone. A violent crime is a violent crime, and you will do the time. It's just icing on the cake that it rhymes. I love it.
What's life like for you now?
So I'm sharing my story. I started out my career as a public speaker, you know, in training and development, and then talking all throughout that career about my experiences to help get conversion therapy banned. And you better believe I'm coming back when we have a change in administration to make it banned on the national level. That's part of my journey. Now I get to be resilient again and come out and hold hands with other victims and say, this is happening, and you can't treat stalking victims like they're crazy or that this is not a real crime. It clearly is. Otherwise, wouldn't be sitting in prison right now. Federal prison with a felony, right? This is a real crime. So my life now is to continue my work as a public speaker.
What's the best advice you'd have for someone being stalked in your situation?
You're not crazy. We hear that all the time. This podcast is validating unbelievably validating, which is why I sent you an email at, I think, midnight after listening to a case that really resonated with me, especially when they're talking about your friends just don't know how to respond. So giving yourself grace is so important. And to know that this is a terrible time. If you're being stalked, it's awful. And I want to see you and honor that. It's awful, but you're going to come out stronger and better if you have the grit to see it out. You're going to be a leader and you're going to do amazing things. To get there, you're going to need a timeline and you're going to need to keep all of your evidence. So many other victims share this very thing. But if I didn't have my timeline, I wouldn't have anything. I don't think I would even have my attorney with, say, a Goldberg, because if you don't have it, you don't have proof. Right. And then finally, I'm going to quote Judge Judy, is that if there's no police report, it didn't happen. So don't leave. Don't let the officer leave without a police report. It's easier said than done. And I obviously didn't lead by example here. But if I were going through this again, and God forbid I might when gets released, I will sit. I will handcuff myself to a bench in the police department, and I'm not going to leave until you take a police report. Because if you don't have a police report, it didn't happen.
Do you think your stalker will come for you when he's released?
I go back and forth. I go back and forth on this. He is not, I don't think my stalker's probably getting the support he needs. I watch him in the victim witness portal resources bouncing around different prisons. I don't know why or what that means, but each time I just think, was he hurt? Is it because he's an overweight, redheaded gay man in prison, who's not easy to deal with? He's right. And has a history of antagonizing people. He could just be sitting in prison getting angrier and angrier. And the reality is, and I'm scared to admit this, and yet I know I have to admit this, is that there's nothing I can really do if he does. Restraining orders don't do anything. It's just a piece of paper. And it certainly, if I had an officer once tell me after I caught the IP of the very household where this was happening, he asked me, what's an IP address? So if that's where we're at today, there is no security, and my stalker can likely get away with what he did before again. Of course, I have my legal team, and heaven help me, I hope I have the finances to back it up.
What do you want to happen to your stalker?
I want him to get therapy, and it would be awesome if he could get rehabilitated. I don't want him to be hurt. I don't want him to even be uncomfortable. That's not what I want for him. And at the same time, it's like a win-win, because if he gets therapy, he gets to get out of the system, and I won't get stopped again. If he can get the help he needs and mentally get the help he needs, then I think, maybe he can truly be healed. And if he can't truly be healed, well, maybe he can be institutionalized or monitored, but through the lens of mental health. I just don't think locking him in a cage is going to change his behavior. So I would really like him to get some serious mental health therapy.
What happened with your ex-husband and his new boyfriend? Do you still hear from them?
Occasionally. So occasionally I hear from my ex-husband and now his husband. They got married a year after our divorce was final. Mazel tov. Great. Fine. Live your lives. Whenever I talk, it's funny. I hear from him. When I do something like this, I hear from him, and it's usually because he's upset that people don't like how he responded in this case. And tough. Yeah, it went on. I gave you all the opportunities in the world. I sent you screenshots. I even sent him my timeline, which was not the thing to do, right? Because then they can delete evidence and do all sorts of things. I don't know if they did or not, but I gave him ample opportunity to respond in a nice way. And how he chooses to respond to this day is, well, you've won. I've lost another friend. We're going to sue you. We're going to sue you for slander. you can't sue someone for slander if they're telling the truth. And lucky for me, there is just enough evidence now as part of the case that you can't say it didn't happen.
What are your thoughts on a stalker registry?
I would love a stalker registry. There are so many great ideas coming out of this podcast. And if you ever decide to come up with a think tank or something that we could get grants for to make these things happen, I'm in, I'm with you. Let's get to work. A stalker registry would be so fantastic. Well, so what happens if my stalker gets out of prison, moves across the country, does whatever, and tries to get a new job and just starts us over with someone else? If he's on a registry, you already know what to look for. And if these things start surfacing again, you can nip them in the bud. Absolutely a stalker registry. And an app. I heard one of your other guests talk about an app to say your stalker or the person you have a restraining order is super close to you. Ping. Why do we not have such a thing? For both the offender and the victim's benefit, so that you can both remove yourself from that situation if that's your choice.
Danny, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If anyone out there is in need of help or is a victim of stalking, please reach out. You can find a list of resources on our Instagram at Strictly Stalking Pod.
You can watch all of our episodes at youtube.com/Strictly Stalking Pod.
And now we're on Patreon, where you can sign up for exclusive bonus episodes, live chat sessions, and check out show merchandise. Just go to patreon.com/Strictly Stalking.
I'm Jake Tiptula.
And I'm Jamie Beebe. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Strictly Stalking.